Hey guys, this is Harry from Toyir. I'm here to answer your Ask Me Anythings. This is my third Ask Me Anything video, and I've just lined up the questions here from Patreon, from my Patreon page. And starting with the first one, Juliette Balder Vanadis Cambier asks, when will you come to France? And I will just look that up right here on the poster. It says here we'll be in France, in Lausanne, at a venue called Les Docks. I think that's in France. It doesn't say here actually. And that's on the 11th of April. We're playing at CCO and in Lyon. On the 15th of April, we're playing at Le Grillin in Colmar on the 16th. And that's it for France for this tour. Of course, I'm talking about the tour From Hell that's coming in April, and of course there may be other shows in France later this year, hopefully festivals also. We don't know that yet. Elaine asks a very different question. The legend says that Tróndur í Gøtu cursed the Christian conquest with his last words. Do any of the Faroese stories or poems give any indication of exactly what these words were? And if not, would you like to recreate something something he might have said? In fact, I would love to know anything else there is to know about him. I've never heard that legend before. The only legend I remember hearing that is not in some of the ballads or in the sagas is the fact that he died fishing. He caught a big halibut and it pulled him off to sea, and that's the only story I know about him. Well, one other. Across the island from Sirgada, there's a place called Shivanes where Terje comes from. And legend has it, as I've heard it at least, that there's a small headland there where Tróndur í Gøtu would have his ships anchored. It's a very good natural harbor, and that's the reason it's called Shivanes, ship headland, it would translate into. Those are the only ones I know. Elaine asks another question. Does Eric Jarl of Late in Armor Lanche have any stories commemorating him in Faroese? I think he's only mentioned in Armor Lanche, and that is probably composed directly out of the sagas. So it's not necessarily a particular Faroese. It's more Norwegian Icelandic. What has been the most challenging aspect of your career is Elaine's last question. That's a very easy question to answer. By far the most challenging aspect has been to make enough money to pay the bills on a regular basis. And to some extent it still is. And that's not just a problem for musicians. As I understand it, it's a problem for all artists. It's difficult to monetize your art, no matter what you're doing, and very few artists are very successful. Most artists are struggling and not successful at all. And we probably find ourselves somewhere in the middle, but it's a constant struggle, worrying about how to pay next month's rent and so on and so forth. I don't need to go into details about that. I'm sure you know how it is. Joe Petro asks, what's your favorite song on the new album and why? I would probably choose the song King of Time because when I'm writing music, I've tried very often to make it as high-flying and as epic as possible. And I think in the verses of the song King of Time, especially the verses, but also the rest of it, when the vocals come in, I managed to make it extremely high-flying and have an extremely epic impression, and I'm very proud of that. And that's one expression that I've tried to recreate in many songs, and I think this is one of the most successful ones. Jennifer Schönenberger asks, which languages do you speak and which was the hardest to learn? Do you want to learn more? I speak Faroese, of course, my mother tongue, and I guess Danish is my second language. I learned that at a very young age, as anyone in the Faroes does, simply by being exposed to Danish media and Danish writing. Third is English. Learned that from watching TV mostly, and in school naturally. Then I learned German in school, but you can't really speak German from learning it in school in the Faroes. You learn the basics of it, and you can read it and do some very basic communication. That is valid for me, at least. I wasn't a very diligent student, but once I finally moved to Germany for 3 years, it definitely helped me understand the German language and put me at an advantage to learn it. Then, of course, I lived in Denmark for 7 years, and I think I speak Danish with maybe a very small accent. I hope, at least. I lived in Iceland for a year, learned Icelandic pretty well. Lived in Norway when I was 10 years old, and so I think Norwegian is easy for me. But there are so many dialects in Norway, and some of them, maybe particularly the one they speak around Haugesund, where we're playing at the Carmageddon Festival, I just have to switch to English because I really can't understand their dialect very well. It's sad that you have to switch to English with other Scandinavians. So that's, I guess you could say I speak Swedish. I would put that as my least accomplished language, but I can understand Swedes pretty well when they speak. It's a bit harder to speak Swedish myself. I can figure it out, but it's probably less proficient than my German. So Swedish and German have been the hardest languages for me, and probably German because it's the one I've used that much more than Swedish. I never lived in Sweden. I never spoke much Swedish to Swedes. With the Amanda Marth guys, most conversations were in English. But I lived in Germany and I had to speak German pretty decent, like for everyday communication, and it's difficult to, although they have pretty much the same grammatic system as with Faroese, it's just different words, and you have to memorize everything in 4 cases and 3 genders over again, and it's just difficult to keep that in your head all at the same time. So I would say German. If I want to learn more languages, absolutely, I'd like to learn them all if I could. I hope before I get too old to learn more languages that I will learn Finnish. I live in the Netherlands now. I'd like to learn Dutch, of course. It would be very useful. I'd like to learn Czech. My girlfriend's from Czechia. That should keep my linguistic drawer full for the next few years at least. Juan Gonzalez asks, if you were tasked with introducing someone to folk metal, what songs or albums would you show them first? I don't really think in genres like that. Folk metal. There's some metal that's called folk metal that's very good. There's some that's less good, and I wouldn't want anyone to think like that, really, that here's a genre called folk metal, now you're going to listen to this and I'm going to show you what that's all about. No, there's good music and there's bad music, and some of it's folk metal, some of it's not. I guess I'd show them Tyr, so that at least I could have another fan and make a bit more money. Scott Nibbling asks, how do you keep your guitar at the upright angle that you do when playing standing up? Are you supporting it with your hands while playing to hold its position? Are you supporting it with your hands while playing to hold its position? Is there something unique with your strap or guitar body shape, weight, pin setup? The question goes on. Let me just answer it. No, there's nothing special about my guitar or the strap. Well, there's some straps it's easier with, but I have a very thick and unslippery strap, and that helps. I remember I've used in the past sometimes these smooth nylon straps, and there's no doubt that if you're wearing any fabric, a t-shirt or something, which I don't always do on stage, the guitar slides much easier downwards. And if your head is heavy, then the guitar will simply go down by itself. But you have to sort of hold it up. If you hold it at an angle, the momentum is much less from gravity to pull that way, although it always pulls it straight down. So no, what I like to do is at least have one of my feet on a higher ground, like on the drum riser or on a monitor, and then it's easier to just rest your guitar on your thigh while you're playing, so there's not even any tension on your shoulders, and that sometimes helps with the guitar playing. But sometimes you can also do it just with your feet planted plainly on the stage, and Terry has certainly done that a lot with his guitar almost straight upright, and it just takes a bit of practice and makes it easier to play sometimes, getting the neck of the guitar closer to your shoulder. Michael Lewandowski asks, what hobbies or interests do you have outside of music? Linguistics, definitely. I keep up with current political affairs. I won't say it's a hobby. I'm just interested in what's happening in the world, and I read and watch the news. I've been a fitness freak, and a serious fitness freak in some periods of my life, although it's sort of lacking a bit right now. But fitness is something I'm very interested in, fitness and nutrition. Yeah. When I'm doing something that has nothing to do with music, it's usually reading the news, or exercising. Tiffany Lee asks, do you plan to start offering Faroese and/or guitar lessons again in the future? Probably not. When I have something I want to say, I like to make a YouTube video and state it as clearly and concisely as I can, or show some technique or some solo or guitar playing practice on YouTube, so I don't have to repeat myself. I have taught guitar in person and on Skype in the past, and it becomes extremely tedious to have to repeat the same things over and over. I'd much rather make a video of it, and it makes less money, but it's just the repetition tends to drive me crazy. Graham Peebles asks, oh no, I already got that question in here. That was the language question. Now I confuse myself. Oh, no, he's repeating a question from Jennifer. Graham Peebles asks, which languages that you speak have you learned latest in life? I think you'll probably answer this with Jennifer's question, but was it the hardest one to learn? Are there any tips for language learning that you've found useful? Well, I went over the languages in the former question. I think the latest language I've learned was German. I lived in Germany from 2009 to 2012, and although I'd learned some German in school, as I said, I spoke it much more fluently after that, and I learned a lot of grammar, and I got a lot of vocabulary and a lot of phrases from simply by being exposed to German and Germans. That was the latest language I learned. I've tips for learning languages. I sort of have a knack for it, I remember phrases and words very easily, and I'm good at pronouncing them usually. It's my one talent that I'm born with. So it's been easy for me when I've put some effort into it. If I didn't have any talent or a knack for it, I suppose I would go about it the same way as I go about singing and playing guitar. Just practice at a very regular interval, and in my experience, it's probably much easier to learn a language by being in the country where this language is spoken, by surrounding yourself with native speakers. And like I did in Iceland, I told everybody I was working with, "You stop speaking English to me, please, and I'll try my best to answer in Icelandic, and I'll ask you what this and that word means if I don't understand." That certainly helped, and I did something similar, although on a smaller scale, in Germany as well. That's it for this time. No more questions, but I see this video is now about 15 minutes long. I want to thank my patrons, of course, everyone who asked me questions here, and in addition to that, Haidar Jonsson, Mike Hines, Scott, Eric Oreski, Benny Olsen, and Tuesday Publishing. I hope to make some more of these videos in the future. Right now I'm very, very busy preparing for the tour in 2 weeks, the Tour from Hell in Europe, and I also have 3 shows with our new band Surma, me and my girlfriend's band, and we have to prepare the music and a lot of other things for that. So that's keeping me very busy. I was hoping to make 4 videos this month as well, but I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make that. If I do, they will be crammed in at the end of this month. So yeah, that's it. Until next time, I hope you have more questions soon. Cheers, bye.